This is Lada, guys, and I wanted to give you some updates. Actually, it's a lazy Memorial Day weekend. As you see, lots of boats. We have a boat launch full of boats here, and that's perfect actually, because for social distancing, see, people are pretty far away, yet they get some fresh air. Unfortunately, the boats do have a lot of diesel fumes, especially when they launch, but it's still a nice view of the lake. Enjoy it together with me. See people walking all the way over there on that, intermediate island, that extension of an island that was built here. And this is Cayuga Lake, as I was telling you previously. And I wanted to talk initially about what's happening yet again with US elections, Biden, Trump, Ukrainegate, but you probably heard my previous talk. I hope you did, because over there we went into it pretty systemically and we told you quite a bit. And of course, my Earthshift report 25, I'm going to link it below. That's where you get all the juice, the real information, the real intel on everything that happened with Burisma case and with Poroshenko, Biden collusion, Hunter Biden, and how and who blew it out of the water. Giuliani. I talk about the details and the things that nobody will tell you anywhere else, simply because it is not profitable politically to talk about these kinds of things. But it continues developing, and I want to just briefly update you on the Ukrainian side of it. So now that this has become very public knowledge, we know for a fact that US MSM is trying very hard to ignore it, and nobody is publishing any information. But in Ukrainian space and Russian media space, it is being discussed very actively, and just as a confirmation that Ukraine is a colony of the US and has been since at least 2014, really truly much earlier than that, but it was quite a fight before that. And then once 2014 rolled in, Poroshenko, Nazis, and that clique, that junta came to power, after that US became a complete colony of the US. Ukraine, I'm sorry, became a complete colony of the US. And on Patreon, I have an article about that with latest information, latest intel. So it's, if you're my member on Patreon, please check it out. Please review all that information. I also want to mention that, of course, for Trump, this is something that they needed to pull out right now a little earlier than they intended. They really truly intended to pull this information out and wave it in the face of the Democrats and Biden closer to elections, because it seemed to Trump that he was winning. And then with coronavirus, with everything that is happening right now, people are unhappy. And Trump's ratings have tanked dramatically, very, very dramatically. So they're now trying to throw money at voters, basically to bribe voters, as aid packages. But Democrats are preventing those packages from passing in the Congress. What is happening with that is that, say, Republicans introduce a new package, like relief package, like to give each working person in the country $2,000 for a few months. And Democrats vote against it because they say we also want illegal migrants into the country to receive this money. If they're not getting this money, then we're going to vote down the entire package. So clearly, this is not because they're concerned about this little man or the plight of the little man. What they're concerned about is their political gain, because if Trump and Republicans successfully pass this kind of package, then it mollifies quite a few voters and may actually put them on his side, because they're getting that extra money. And if this package doesn't pass, then, screw the voters, think Democrats, because any discontent right now in the country is in favor of Joe Biden and Democrats. And it seemed just recently that Joe Biden was really in deep waters, that once this information about Ukrainegate came out, that his corruption should work against him, and he was practically like walking dead. He is trying to be hip right now, and he's doing a podcast out of his basement where he's pretty much hiding out from coronavirus in isolation. So he's a very old man, one of the oldest. I believe he's 78 if I'm not mistaken, older than Trump. And he's trying to, he was told, hey, listen, Joe or Mr. Biden, you have to be relevant somehow. And so he's doing this podcast out of his basement. But the thing is that in some states which are traditionally Republican, he's winning, and he has higher ratings than Trump at this point overall in this race, which is seemingly shocking, because really when he opens his mouth, he is not really, that doesn't really come across very well. He says like, whatever, vote for me, do not vote for me, I don't care, you know what I'm about, I'm not gonna defend my views or anything like that. So people, in fact, when they vote for Biden, they vote against Trump. That's what this boils down to. And this is going to be flip-flopping for the duration of this year, and consider this my prediction. But guys, remember what I predicted back in 2016 and especially 2017. That was in ESR 16. That was about elections and the consequences of elections. That was published either the end of, I believe that was published, that report was published just before elections, and I predicted there that Trump would win. Then in my webinar 1, the very first webinar, Can Trump Survive His First Term? I actually predicted that Trump will not be re-elected. That was the beginning, I believe, February of 2017, right after he took oath and became legitimately president of the US. I also predicted the same thing, and I said he would not be re-elected in an interview I gave at the time to the Time One Radio, to the Plain Truth show. I don't remember which interview that was, but that was my prediction as well. And after that, Trump managed to really reverse the trend and get Republicans, as well as a lot of other categories of potential voters and power structures, such as Pentagon, police, and other power structures on his side. Not all of them, like FBI, he was still fighting with FBI. CIA, I don't think was on board, but Pentagon, the military, were definitely on board with him, and that's a big deal. Also, all the Republicans who were even against him initially, he also managed them to get them on board with himself and his agenda. And he had to succumb to this swamp that he wanted to clean up in order to survive, just as was predicted in my ESR 16, which I will link below this video, and webinar 1 as well. So right now the situation is that this black swan event interfered. What is black swan event? This catalyst interfered, and about that I talk at length in my new series of webinars, series 3, COVID-19 catalyst in 2020 through 2026 predictions. And I will also link that series below, and in webinar 11 and webinar 12 we discuss that as well, how these black swan events, how catalysts work, how timeline shifts work. So there was one timeline, we're going in that direction, and then because of micro shifts, what happened is, as the result of various micro shifts and black swan events such as COVID-19 and trade wars and the situation with China, this trade war with China, oil war with Russia and Saudi Arabia, that whole conglomerate of things that we will actually discuss in future webinars as well as on Patreon. Watch for webinar 13. That's going to be about the economy after COVID-19. When it comes out of isolation, what I predict for that. So after all these events, what happens is that Trump is in a completely different situation. And somebody who seemed like walking dead, Biden, who seemed not to have any energy, he actually gets the entire deep state, entire dark state, entire establishment behind him, plus the entire globalist neoliberal agenda behind him. And because Trump also ruffled so many feathers in, I would say, very unwisely, with a lot of his statements, a lot of his strange actions, including internationally. So he lost the international support that he had previously. So he is losing to Biden now, who seemed like a slam dunk, who seemed like he was a nobody, you know, a lame duck rather. Sorry, not slam dunk, lame duck I meant to say. And now we're in a situation when Biden, that walking dead, that zombie, could actually become the next US president very easily. And I discussed that in previous talk, what this would mean in terms of inverted collapse. And again, listen to my webinar 11 and 12, where I talk more about these things. And they will, again, as I said, all my webinars from the new series and the other webinars are linked below this video. So at this point, I'm going back to my prediction of early 2017, when I said that Trump will not be re-elected. Guys, we flipped the timeline several times already, and we may flip it again. Trump is a fighter. He is an incredibly, you know, like staunch fighter. He does not give up. And even when he gives up, he still gets up and fights again. So his fighting ability is legendary. He can get bankrupt. That happened to him several times. I believe 2 or 3 times he went bankrupt. And then he gets back on his feet and he is again a billionaire. So in this situation, because he takes too many undue risks, he again could go bankrupt, so to speak, but now in the race for presidency, and yet he may still win. So I'm not counting him out. But regardless of what he is, he's like a combo of Gorbachev and Yeltsin. I'm leaning more towards Gorbachev, or rather anti-Gorbachev, because we are, or inverted Gorbachev, as you, if you will, because that's inverted collapse we are working through in the US and in the West compared to the USSR. I think pretty much that right now it's a 50-50 chance, and I'm getting my popcorn, or semichki as they do in Russia when they watch movies. Semichki are roasted sunflower seeds, very cool stuff. And this is basically going to be something to behold, something to watch. So as I said, they had to pull out this Burisma case and the Ukrainegate out of their sleeve too early, because Trump is losing. But there is a lot of development that is happening. Like, for example, in Ukraine, they are trying to make that official, and Trump is pressuring right now Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who is also a pocket president of the United States, to admit that there was corruption case and to start officially prosecuting Poroshenko. But Poroshenko is not really in danger of going to jail or being truly prosecuted. Currently, there are 15 criminal cases opened against Poroshenko in the country, and they're going nowhere. So Poroshenko has enough judges in his pocket and enough, and basically the entire judicial system. And nobody will move a muscle in Ukraine, not because there is nothing to talk about, but because they're afraid. Basically, they are reasoning this way. The entire country has turned into this corruption central of the world, unfortunately, since 2014. And ever since all the good people moved out, which started all the way back in 1989, and then throughout the 90s, all the good people moved out of Ukraine. I was discussing it at multiple occasions, say in my Earthshift Report 2, which was dedicated to Ukraine, Earthshift Report 3, which was dedicated to Ukrainian oligarchs primarily, and there were some other reports as well in which I discussed the same. USSR'S 6, I believe, also. So, like, how we put it in Odessa, all the good people left and turned off the light. And so that's basically what happened to Ukraine. So right now, the judges, for example, the judicial system is so corrupt, so not sovereign, not independent, that they are afraid to move a muscle. They are reasoning that Zelensky may be gone tomorrow, and Poroshenko might come back and again be president. And if we rule against them, or rule to open a case against them and start actually prosecuting it, he will have our heads. So they don't want to go ahead with that. And everything is going to be like in and out, of course, yes and no. Poroshenko doesn't show up, and he's supposed to show up for a hearing or for interrogation, and he's like, okay, so he did not show up. Well, in other words, nobody is doing anything, and none of this will be moving ahead for as long as say there are elections in the US. They don't want to go against Biden, because what if he gets elected? So, but they don't want to be against Trump in case he gets reelected. After elections in the US have happened, and that's in November of 2020, then they will know who the next president is, and they will again begin kissing that president's ass, whoever that might be. So that's the unfortunate situation currently in Ukraine. And Ukraine is not the only country that is kissing America's ass and is completely dependent and completely under the thumb, this like little servant, not even a vassal, it's like little servant of the US. It's worse than that. It's basically a slave of the US, and they will do whatever US says. They actually want to be dependent on the US. They want, like they were sitting Biden at the president's in the president's seat, the chairman's seat during the government meeting, and Poroshenko was sitting on the side together with all other members of the government when Poroshenko was president. There are plenty of pictures like that, plenty of videos on the internet. Well, that's how they are, that's how they behave, and that's very unfortunate, but that's the reality of things in Ukraine, and that's the reality of things in the US. So I just wanted to update you again very quickly on this, and this is the end of this chat. I hope you're enjoying your weekend from Cayuga Lake, New York. This is Lada. There are boats over there. Talk to you soon. Bye. Hello friends, Lada here. I created a new series of 4 Earthshift webinars to help you navigate these turbulent and fast-changing times, and I want to tell you about them. The name of this new series is COVID-19 Catalyst and 2020-2026 Predictions. As a result of the Earthshift and its catalyst COVID-19, much will be reworked and rethought in our world in the next few years. This series is important if you want to understand what and why is happening worldwide and in your backyard, if you want to orient yourself with ease as to the present and future, if you want to not just survive but thrive in our fast-shifting world. Each webinar has its own focus and a set of topics, each builds on the previous. I recommend you buy the full series in order to get the complete picture. The webinars are live videos of Lada. Each consists of main video talk and a Q&A. Some may have additional written and video bonuses. Webinars are priced very affordably, and despite the relative shortness of this series, it is rich in revelations and breakthrough ideas and predictions. You know me. First in series, webinar 11, Democrats and Project CHIMERICA, who created COVID-19, was released on April 30th. We delve into a possible global conspiracy and the facts pointing at 2 or more countries' collusion. We look into the trail pointing at COVID being a synthetic virus, where it may have originated from and why it spread out of Wuhan. I reveal to you the details of Project CHIMERICA and who is behind it. Second in new series, webinar 12, Earthshift and COVID-19, the Catalyst of Change, was released just recently on May 17th. This webinar is your compass to the unfolding Earthshift and events that catalyze it. Why are we in the midst of major shifts? How catalysts and black swan events work to expedite the Earthshift? How incremental timeline shifts create a different reality. This is the most comprehensive and future-oriented webinar of Series 3, and it includes 17 new trends I I've identified, and 13 new multidimensional futurist predictions by Lada. Third in Series 3, coming in the end of May, Webinar 13, Global Economy, 4D Shift After Isolation. We talk about economy and international trade, why the replacement of petrodollar is happening so slowly, and what the future holds. We discuss the real economic situations of China, USA, Russia, UK, Europe, Australia, Canada, Asia, and Latin America, and how the current crisis is catalyzing the shift to a different economic, financial, and trade model. And finally in this series, coming in June, date to be decided, Webinar 14, From Pisces to the Aquarian Age, 2020 through 2026 timeline predictions. We talk about the galactic dawn and the dawn of the age of Aquarius, how Neptune, Saturn, and period 9 shift will change the world. This webinar focuses on unseen forces that facilitate and catalyze the Great Earth shift, and on something highly requested by my clients, the timing of changes. I predict and explain from a higher dimensional perspective why these changes are necessary and when and how they may be occurring. Also, I will discuss and emphasize for you how to prepare to these changes. All webinars are available at ladare.com. Click on links located in the description box and comment section below this video, or go directly to ladare.com and click on Webinars tab on top. Also to mention, exclusive offer for all Series 3 participants, limited time biggest ever discount on Big Picture Series 1 and 2. Buy one or more Series 3 webinars and get 50 to 60% off on prior series. Includes all past bestsellers, The Future of Money, The Putin Enigma, Inverted Collapse, Period 8 predictions, plus all Forbidden History webinars. These are all big picture foundational webinars, and they really are a great prerequisite to understand the current series. After purchase, you'll find private sale links at the bottom of your webinar page. Hope you enjoy my new webinar series and see you soon.